everybody. This is New Life Testimonies. I'm Kinsey. I'm your host, and it is a great privilege of mine to have my sweet friend Alyssa on here today. She has such a heavy story of God's faithfulness, salvation, deliverance, and even miraculous healing, so I'm so ready for you guys to hear her story, and you would never guess the things that you've been through. Like, I feel like we were just those average, like, passerbys, and you're with Rainin, my daughter, in class, and I just would never guess the things that you've told me. Whenever you sat down to share your testimony, I was like, what? You what? So, and you carry it with such grace. Like,
Thank you.
You feel the joy of the Lord whenever I'm around you, and it's just so sweet. And although, like, you have that pain still, you're carrying it differently, though, because you have the blood of Jesus applied to that pain, and you have it as a story of hope now for the people around you, and you're obedient to share that story of hope. So I'm just so excited. I'm really excited. I'm so ready for this. And it was so hard to get together. We canceled like 3 times. Yeah. So
I think that is
sickness.
the enemy.
Yeah. But we're here today.
We did
so
it.
I'm really excited. So wherever you want to start in your testimony is fine with me.
Oh goodness. Guess we could start as like a kid. I started showing signs of chronic illness at 10 years old. Growing up, we went to this situation of a ministry.
The house church.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was like up in the air, maybe a cult, but I think
I want you to elaborate on that a little bit.
When you really look into it now, and even some family members, I've talked to them like privately, and they're like, it was a cult. Like,
yeah, whenever you sat down to share your testimony, you were like, so I was in a cult. And I was like, what?
Grew up in it. I don't think it always, like, started that way, but it definitely...
That's how it always is, though. That's how cults are. You're brainwashed into thinking it's not really... This is normal. Yeah. This is, our religion. This is what we believe.
And leadership changed a lot. Yeah. So I think when it started, there were definitely things that were not the Bible, and this was not Jesus. Like, we didn't talk about Jesus. Like, that wasn't a part of it, but I think it did start as a like loving way that people were coming to know the Lord, but not in the way that is actually, I don't know if the correct way to do it is the right way to say it.
Did you say it was called The Way?
Yes.
Too?
The Way International.
Yeah, this is The Way.
The Way.
And it's actually not The Way.
Yeah, it really isn't. So it was really weird. Like, I grew up not even in a kids ministry. Like, we didn't have that. They did at headquarters, which was in New Knoxville, Ohio, oddly. And a lot of my family lived in that town. So when we would go for, like, Christmas, Thanksgiving, like, those kinds of things, on Sunday, we would stop in there. We had to get dressed up so nice because, the men in there would be wearing, like, full suits, everything, like, dress shoes, all, like, whole 9 yards. All the women would be in dresses, like, pantyhose, like, heels, everything. And so we would have to dress very nicely. If you were going to wear pants, had to be, like, very nice dress pants, all the things. I think if someone would have walked in there with tattoos, they would have lost their minds. Yeah. God forbid they had dyed hair. It would have been a whole situation.
It's funny because, like, we're Pentecostal. Yeah. And I feel like the outside view of Pentecostals is we're the same way. Yeah. And we're not. No. Like, I have a tattoo. Yes. I've dyed my hair. And I've been a Pentecostal my whole entire life. I feel like that is just a average, like, generalization of what a Pentecostal church is. But it's really not. No, it really isn't. Well, some are, actually. Some are. There's exceptions.
Church of God.
Yeah, Church of God.
Is a little different.
Yeah, it is.
But it was never just come as you are. Like, you have to, like, fully... People probably really had to change themselves. I was so little that all I knew was we show up and we go to this little thing. But when we did house church, it was just, like, my siblings and I, we were little. And there was no, like, foundational, like kids' church or anything. So we would just sit through these teachings, like, so confused because we didn't have a basis of anything. So, and gosh, my youngest brother, Aiden, like by the time that he got old enough, he's 5 years younger than me, then he really like just did not know what was going on. He couldn't sit still. He has really bad ADHD. So he would get in trouble a lot for moving, but he didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
It was really crazy. It was all rules, super legalistic. We talked about the Holy Spirit a little bit, but not like it's very different to how the Holy Spirit actually is. Yeah. It wasn't like, hey, this is living inside of you and you can have a relationship with it, and this is God and this is Jesus and all of the things that we know. It was just like Christ is in you, and that was
so compared to how they taught you who the Holy Spirit was, did they teach you that like he was a person?
No.
What did they teach you?
I don't even really know. Like, there were so many
Was it like
things.
Manifestations of the Holy Spirit?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because they talk a lot about like speaking in tongues as you should, and like all of those kinds of things, and like translating and like all of those manifestations of the Spirit. And that was definitely placed on like a really high pedestal over like the fruits of the Spirit and like how are you actually behaving in your life. Because if you could do these things, then like you were good. And they were taught in a way that was like I know some of my aunts, they had to go through this class where if they were learning it and they had to, like, they would have to speak in tongues, and if it sounded similar to the time before, then it wasn't from the Lord.
That's crazy.
And if the translation was similar than the one before, then it wasn't from the Lord, and you just faked it. And they'd do it over and over and over again. They'd have to go down the whole alphabet for their tongue and everything. And so a lot of my family's tongues are like very developed, which just doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. I mean, there's demonic tongues too.
Yeah. And so it always is kind of intimidating too, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Because they are so developed.
It's a gift.
It's a
gift that you take willingly.
Yes. But it was practiced really weird.
So compared to how they taught you, how you were introduced to the Holy Spirit and how you know the Holy Spirit now, what's the difference to you now?
You have a relationship with it.
Yeah.
And there was really no life in it at all. And that's what I grew up knowing was kind of just like the head knowledge. Mm-hmm. But even then, I didn't feel like I had a lot of head knowledge.
Yeah. I
thought that I knew nothing because I didn't have a foundation. So everything that was being stacked onto it didn't make any sense. And the teachings were like really like over our heads. It was a lot of like origins of all of these like Hebrew words and like those kinds of things were like, I feel like my brothers and I were just like, okay. Like I'll sit here and I'll sing the songs. We'd sing songs at the beginning, and if you weren't singing, you'd get like an elbow to the stomach. Because it was seen as rude if you weren't singing along. And I don't even know why we were singing the songs, because it's not worship.
Wasn't worship.
No, it's just like a routine. Like we do this, and then we do this, and then someone speaks in tongues and translates it, and then...
That's crazy.
Yeah. It was very, very
Do you
strange.
remember any of the translations?
Mm-mm. It did seem like it was pretty much the same. Yeah. Every time. Like, I always thought before I had left that ministry, I always thought that it was rehearsed and that they just had the same thing every time. I had never compared it at all because I didn't remember all of it. But I always thought, like, this sounds the same. I thought that they had one just memorized that they used every single time. Yeah. Whether it was actually that way, I don't think so, but it really seemed like it was.
And your parents were, like, super involved in the ministry, too.
Yes. They did, like, missions training. They went to this camp, and they stayed there for years. They were moved around everywhere. They lived in New Orleans for a year to go, like, down there and teach down there. They both... My dad taught a lot, but my mom, she did teach sometimes. Mm. And my grandparents were really high up. Like, we'd go to we'd go to the headquarters. And I remember when Gabe and I were in the kids ministry, Gabe was like the biggest Klingon baby in the world. And so we'd get dropped off and he'd scream for hours.
That's
and
ugly.
I would just like, I'd be fine. I'd be playing, like it'd be okay. And I was still pretty shy, but I was like a little talkative after I was around people for a while. And so they'd be like, who are you here with? Like, we don't see you guys ever. And I'd be like, oh, I'm here visiting my grandparents. They're like, oh, who's your grandparents? I was like, Dawn and Charlotte Wilbur. They're like, you're Dawn and Charlotte Wilbur's grandchild. I was like, yes.
Yeah,
I'm
so
like
what?
5 years old. I'm like, okay.
That's
like,
funny.
how do you know them? You know my mama? I don't understand. Yeah. They knew who my entire family was. And so even now when we'll go places where like there's people that have left, there's a lot of people that have left and they've moved on to other places. And sometimes there'll just be like a big group of people where my parents are like, oh, well, this is like so-and-so and we've known them for this long. They're like, oh, I knew you when you were a baby. And it's like what we get all the time.
Yeah.
We're like, I've never seen you in my life. Gabe was awful about it because he'd look at me and be like, who is this? Just like
I'm
full
the same
volume.
way. I'm the same way. Because, you know, I've gone to this church my whole life, and people come up to me still today.
Yeah.
25 years old almost, and they're like, Kenzie, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you. How's your mom?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know you.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
so bad.
It's always the most awkward situation because you want to be like,
Yeah, you just like go along with it.
Yeah.
Yes, I know you. Yeah.
yeah. Gabe would stand there like directly in front of them and look at me in full volumes where they could so hear it because they're like 2 feet from us. And he'd be like, I don't know who this is. Who is this? And I'd be like, Gabe.
And you're like, I don't know.
We're about to
We'll
find
talk
out.
about it later.
Like, it's okay.
That's funny.
Yeah. So that is like, I didn't really have much of a foundation. I knew that I believed in God and I knew that I was a Christian, and that really like through high school that definitely held me. Like when people would, oh gosh, I had a lot of friends that didn't believe in me. I went to a public high school, and they would talk like they'd say something crazy and then they'd be like, I don't want to offend God or whoever, and I'm like, ugh, okay. So even with the foundation, the not foundation that I had,
Yeah.
I still had that in me for sure.
Yeah.
But I didn't, not to like the fullness
God planted
that it
a
should have
seed.
been. Yes. And I kept it when I think like a lot of people would have just like let it go.
Probably resented it.
You resented it, let it go, just kind of went with what their friends were saying.
Yeah.
But I kept to it. But took some time.
And what was the other church? Was it like a summer camp that you went to?
Yes.
Okay.
That changed a lot of things. That really that
kind of like made the seed start to grow.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I think if we wouldn't have had that, things would be a little different.
Yeah.
I think I still would have ended up here, but it would have been different for sure.
What was your first encounter with God? Like your first real encounter with God?
Oh gosh. Oh man, I don't know.
Do you think it could have been at that summer camp?
Probably, and I probably just don't remember. Like,
Yeah.
I know we did, one thing that we would do, like, it was usually every night there, is we did this thing, we called it soaking, where everyone would come in, like, we'd get ready for bed, put on your pajamas, like, get all ready for bed and everything, and we'd come into the sanctuary, and they would play worship music, and you'd just sit in the dark. And just sit there. That's probably
nice.
what it was.
That sounds relaxing.
So sweet. And there would be like...
Just creating space for the Holy Spirit to move.
Yes, absolutely. And there'd be like people crying on the altars. People would like lay on their face and just stay there for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That was so sweet. I still whenever I do go back, that is one thing that I feel like everyone looks forward to is soaking at night. And then you go to bed just like so peaceful.
Yeah.
It's so great. That probably is. I'm sure
that's so sweet.
What it was. Yeah.
That was definitely your first time you're like, okay, this is actually God.
Yes.
You saw the fruit.
Yeah. In a different kind of spirit that was sweet and peaceful and not like you're doing all of these things wrong. Mm-hmm. And we've got to fix this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened with your friend? You met a friend at this camp, right? And what can you explain what happened?
Yeah. So the first year that I went, I met this girl. She was in my power group is what we called it. And one of my power group leaders is actually one of my cousins that I had actually never met. So that was really fun to get to know her. And she was super silly. And Macy was super silly. So that really, like, invited her to just be her full self and everything. Yeah. And she was just, like... She was a firecracker. Like you never knew what was coming. She was so funny. She was always really loud, but everyone loved that so much. Like when people would come in on the first day, she'd be like, "Let me show you around. Like let me take you everywhere."
That's so
not
sweet.
that big, but she'd like take you by the hand and like walk you around.
Yeah.
She'd say the silliest stuff. She was just the sweetest ever. I met her my first year, and then I was with her a lot of my second, and that was my going into my junior year of high school was my second year going, and this was around the time where the ministry was like getting not great. Like a lot of people were leaving. We had a lot of family friends that had stepped away from it, and so we just never saw them. My mom had left it around that time, and there was technically, we didn't enforce it at all, but there was a mark and avoid policy. So we didn't talk to some of the people that had left. I don't think intentionally. It could just kind of like
drifted away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mom left it, and
but your dad stayed, right?
My dad stayed, and then my brothers and I stayed for about another year. I stuck around.
Did your mom explain why she left, or did something happen for her to leave?
She later on she told me it was the same thing. There was no life in it. It was the same thing every single week, like a routine. Yeah, is what it was. She didn't feel like she was getting fed by it anymore either. And she wanted to explore something else. She knew there was something else out there. She was reading the Word for herself. And
that's powerful.
She was like, why do we not talk about Jesus?
Yeah.
Like, why is this literally never brought up? Mm-hmm. This is crazy that this, like, Jesus is never brought up. Yeah,
the Gospels are so important in the Bible.
Yeah, and for those to never be mentioned.
And I feel like you can't look at the Old Testament without knowing the person of Jesus and understand what is the point in all of this. Yeah. Without Jesus, there's no point in all of it. Because all of it is so prophetic and points towards Jesus. Every story in the Old Testament points to Jesus and his sacrifice. So it's really powerful that she was going on her own time and realizing, like, what?
Yeah.
Okay, this is not adding up.
Not correct.
Yeah.
Like, this is so strange, because if you only have the Old Testament perspective, that is going to, like, skew everything.
It's not fun.
No.
If you are a new Christian.
It's a little wild.
If you are a new Christian and you go straight into the Old Testament, I would not recommend that.
No.
It's very heavy.
No. It's
even
good
sometimes
after
I'm
you
like,
know.
you know, you're in that place with Jesus where you're like, okay, God, I'm gonna flip open to my Bible randomly. Yeah. Show me, like, speak to me. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go to like Isaiah where he's like, I'm gonna burn everyone alive. And I'm like, I don't want to read that.
Yeah. Or you open like one of the genealogies and you're like, this is just going on for pages. That's all right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at this point, you were raised in the cult. You didn't have any spiritual connection, really. But God had planted a seed, and then he used the summer camp to kind of, like, water that seed. You met Macy, was her name. You met Macy, and then you were experiencing symptoms of your diagnosis, right, at this point?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So how was that? What did that aspect of your life look like for you?
I did never explain what happened to Macy, if that...
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. Yes,
no, you're fine.
Yeah.
That was really important to how I ended up leaving. Sorry, I don't want to...
No, don't be sorry. This is your story.
It's okay. Macy, it was that fall in my junior year of high school, like after my mom had been out of it for about a year at that point. And it was October, like mid to end of October. It was October 18th, 17th. And I was at a football game that evening, and I found out when we left that she had passed away in a car accident that morning. It was horrific from what I was told. She lived in Alaska, so it was already icing over up there, and her car had hit a patch of ice. And I just, like, lost it. Like, I remember I, like, hyperventilated in my friend's car, and I just bawled and bawled and bawled. I bawled for, like, 2 days.
Yeah. That was your first real loss, wasn't it?
Yeah. For someone that was, like, that close to me, and after that, we had, like, a lot of group chats of everyone from the camp that was really close to her, and we would do, like, conference calls with everybody to talk everything through and to hear from her sisters. And I just remember, like, being in that and hearing from everybody all the time, and I was like, I don't want to go back to this. Like, I wanted to feel closer to her, and watching the live stream of that church in Ohio made me feel closer to her and made me remember. And so that was really, like, she really pulled me out, like, in, like, a weird way. I remember thinking, like, I'm not going back. Like, I want to sit and I want to watch. And it really was, like, I didn't know at the time that still, like, that was so wrong and I didn't need to be there. I was just, like, tunnel visioned on, I miss her so much. And so I stopped going. Members of my family were upset and a little angry with me.
How old were you when this happened?
16. And she was a year older than me, so she was 17 when she passed. And so I stopped going, and it was like a couple weeks after that I had some friends that were going to this concert in Atlanta, and it was like one of my favorite artists, and I was so jealous. And it was on a school day too. And I remember one of them that morning told me, like, hey, we have one of our friends backed out. We have an extra ticket for tomorrow. And I was like, well, my parents are not going to let me do this. I'll try, like, as hard as I can, but there's no way. And I like, texted my dad and, like, called my family. And my dad was like, well, who's taking you guys? And I asked my friend, like, who the other friend's dad that was taking us. It was Randy Ball.
Oh, yeah. Pastor Randy.
Yeah, and I gave my dad his name, and he texted me back a few minutes later, like, is this a kids pastor? And I was like, I don't know. Like, let me...
The best kids pastor ever?
Yeah. Like, let me text this girl that I don't know. Because my friend was the only one that I knew of this whole group, because none of them went to our school. And she texted me back and was like, yes, my dad's a kids pastor. And I was like, cool, like, this might actually get me somewhere. And I told my dad, and by that point I hadn't smiled in like 2-3 weeks. it was so bad. I felt like I was in a daze. And I was already like physically, I mean, we'll get to that, but I was sick as well.
Yeah.
But my dad, somehow, my parents talked to me about it later that night, and they're like, we're going to let you go. And I was like, no way. So I skipped school the next day, and I met all these girls, and I was like, hey, how do you know these guys? Like, they don't go to Bearden. Like, I don't know who these people are. And she's like, oh, these are my church friends. And I was like, oh, okay. Where do you go to church? And she was like, oh, Park West on Millbrook Pike. And I was like, okay. And I kind of like tucked that back in my brain. And I noticed how they were so close. Yeah. And that was not anything that I had ever experienced or even seen from like my friends' youth groups and things. They were like, they were friends, but not in the way that I was seeing. And so I went a couple more months of just like watching the live stream online. And then I told my mom, like, hey, we should go and try this church. Like so-and-so goes there. And that was January of 2020. And we went like twice. And it was the biggest culture shock. And then
what did you think? Well, yeah, of course. What did you think your like first time in the sanctuary? The first service that you went to?
Oh my goodness.
What were your thoughts?
I was just like wide-eyed, like standing there because I didn't know what to do. Yeah.
You had never seen
different. Worship? No. I didn't even know that existed. Like I didn't know what was happening. Like I knew that people did songs when you went to church, but I didn't know what it was. Like I think it was more seen as like a concert to us than it was anything else. It was just so incorrect, but I had no idea. And I just remember that friend when we were walking out the door, she was like, how'd you guys like it? And we were like, yeah,
we might not be
so
back.
Good. Great. And we kind of sat on it, and I started going to the student ministry. Mm-hmm. And that was where I really started to learn what that was about, and it started to not freak me out anymore. Yeah. And
you gotta know, you have to understand, and that's what I love about our pastor, because if something happens, like a manifestation of the Holy Spirit in the sanctuary, he goes into depth about what is happening, why it's happening. Like, there was this new girl that came a couple of Sundays ago. I sat next to her and her boyfriend, and there was the interpretation, the speaking in tongues and the interpretation. Yeah. And I looked at her, I was like, did that freak you guys out? And she was like, it freaked my boyfriend out a little bit. This is a Baptist church, right? I was like, no, this is not a Baptist church. Not a Baptist church at all. Yeah. But anyway, so you were going to Student Men, and how did that make you feel?
I was just, like, everyone seemed so close. Yeah. And, of course, everyone loved Jesus, and that is not something that I had. None of my friends knew the Lord. And Pastor Adam was also over at the time, and so that was just so much fun being around there. Like, we were doing like squad wars, and it was so much fun. We were like going out to like the park and doing like capture the flag battles and everything in the summertime, and it was just so cool to see how all of them are so close, even when we had to go on, like, we went on Zoom for a while. Yeah. Because it was COVID. And I really fell in love with it. And I knew that I wanted to stay. And then we'd go to, like, cookout afterwards and got to be around each other even more. And it was just so cool to see, like, a whole big group of, like, 16, 17-year-old kids just going to cookout at like 10 o'clock at night.
It's amazing. It's awesome. It's so much fun. Yeah. Fellowship is so important. Yeah. It's so underrated.
Yeah, it was so good. And like some of the leaders would come along, and like I remember Dakota came a couple times, and it was just crazy. But it was so much fun, and I loved it so much, and I was like, yeah, I'm staying here. Yeah.
You found your home. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So where were you at with your diagnosis at this point?
Ooh. I think I probably need to go back. At that point, I really didn't have anything diagnosed at all. I had been having severe ocular migraines for years at that point. I started getting them in 5th grade. I still remember that first one so vividly because I remember being really confused, but I didn't think anything of it. Anything that had ever happened with me, there was one member of my family that I would tell, and it was always, it's fine. That's normal.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think anything of it. I just went with it, and it started happening like every single day. I would get the visual part every day. I'd start to not be able to see. I'd be in school and suddenly not be able to see my teacher anymore. I couldn't write anything because I couldn't see my paper.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like trying to use the little bit of vision that I had to get anything down on like a test that I was taking. And with that, I started getting a lot of symptoms that just came out of nowhere and didn't seem to have any connection to anything. I was like extremely exhausted, and I didn't know. I thought that everyone was exhausted all the time. To this day, I don't remember a time where I wasn't exhausted, but it was getting so bad. I was in so much pain from the migraines. By my sophomore year of high school, I would get one and I would be out of school for a week.
Yeah.
I'd be in my bed laid out. My family would have to bring me food up to my bed for every meal. And if I like moved my arm, my head would pound. I didn't even have to like do anything. I couldn't hold my head up. I was so dizzy. I was so weak. My heart started doing weird things around that time. That was weird. I could tell that I was inflamed. It was all just like really, really crazy. I was so sick. And there were more symptoms that like I'm not.
Yeah.
Like the list could go on and on. And it was really bad. My sophomore year of high school, I missed 60 days of school. And I was working through a lot of it. Like if I couldn't move, that's when I stayed home. But otherwise, my parents were like, "You've missed so much. You just have to go if you can."
Yeah.
And I would be in class like, I'm going to fall out of my chair. Like I can't stay here. I'm so dizzy. My head feels like there's water sloshing around. Like I can't sit here.
Yeah. And you loved school too. Was that whenever you started to struggle with depression?
That was when I started to love school because I couldn't be there.
Yeah.
So my freshman year of high school was really good. It was really fun. I think that was probably my last like normal year that I could remember. Like I was still missing school, but I was like getting through it enough. But my sophomore year, like it just tanked. It was so bad. I remember being in one of my film classes and texting my dad like, "I'm so dizzy. I feel like I can't see. Like I'm gonna pass out. My heart is doing weird things. It's palpitating. Like I'm so exhausted. I'm getting ocular migraines left and right." And so we went to just like a walk-in clinic at that point. He came and picked me up from school and we went. And all they could figure out was that I had hypothyroidism there. And they were like, "Well, maybe you should see like an endocrinologist or something, or go and see someone else. Like this is all we've got."
Yeah. Maybe you should go see a real doctor.
Yeah, maybe you should go somewhere else because this is a little crazy.
Yeah.
But other than that, you look perfectly healthy. And I was like, cool.
You don't feel perfectly healthy.
Yeah. I was like,
You're not
missing so much. And they were like, maybe try and like see if you can find some triggers for your migraines. And I was like, dude, like there's none.
Yeah.
I had a notebook that I wrote like everything that I ate that day, my activity level, like how dizzy I was. I wrote everything on like a scale of 1 to 10, and everything I did, everything I ate, everything I drank to try and find a connection. And there was nothing. There was never anything. And my family has a history of migraines. A lot of the women on my mom's side do. And so we thought that was it.
Yeah.
And mine were just really bad. It was the kind of diagnosis that we went with. I went to a, I don't think, what would they be called? I went to I guess a female doctor. I don't think she was a gynecologist, but I went to one of those.
Yeah.
Because my mom was like, maybe they can check your hormones or something and see if something is weird. Because if your hormones are off, that could be causing migraines. And they were like, we're just going to put you on birth control and go with that. So I started that at like 15 years old.
That's so weird.
I know, because they were like, well, a lot of women have migraines due to their hormones being strange. And so
and
they
it didn't
just
help
went
at
with
all?
that. No.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was going to like every single specialist at that point. This was like mostly my sophomore year of high school, a little bit of my junior, but I was just going to see any specialist under the sun because I'd go to one and they'd be like, we don't find anything, but you should go and see this one. And so they'd refer me to someone else. And it was just like a domino effect.
Yeah.
Like I was seeing, there was one time I remember I had 3 specialist appointments in a day. It was insane. I would have multiple a week and all of them were coming up with nothing and they didn't know what to do. At one point I ended up at an ENT's office and like that shows you like how much we were just trying anything.
Yeah.
Was we were like, maybe there's something going on with their ears or something of that sort. So I went to an ENT's office and he looked at my nose like one time and was like, I can see your sinuses are infected and your septum is severely deviated.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what do we do here? And so they put me on like several rounds of antibiotics and it didn't kill it. I went through like 3 or 4 at that point, which is so not healthy.
Yeah.
It's so bad for you. But surgery was going to be like that was going to be a last ditch effort at that point. So I ended up getting sinus and septum surgery because they were like, well, like some people, when they get their septum fixed, it'll take away their migraines. And we were really banking on that at that point. And I got the surgery done, and it didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It was so crazy. That, like, the recovery wasn't awful, but it definitely wasn't great. Like, I was so swollen. It was insane. But I got that. Didn't do anything. They're still referring me to people, and they're like, you just need to go see a neurologist at this point. That's the best thing that we can do for you is you go and see someone that works with the brain. And I did a couple months later, and all they could do was put me on medication. And they did an MRI as well, and they just saw that some parts of my brain had gone to sleep at that point from the...
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're like, we're seeing these spots where, like, these are just... It's not active.
It's crazy.
Because of how many, like, the severity of the migraines that I would have. At that point, I was getting some depression, but not to the level that I would get later, because I was just in bed.
Yeah.
All of the time. My friends would bring me schoolwork. I was doing like online school before it was a thing. So I was just like emailing my teachers all the time. One of my art classes, I feel like I've measured all of my school years in art classes because that was like the thing that I looked forward to.
Yeah.
And I was in advanced art one year, and it was my last class of the day. And I had either missed the class or I had been sent home at some point in the day, so much where it was at the beginning of the school year. And I didn't make it there for 2 weeks, and someone that was not in that class but just kind of floating and doing like an online situation had sat in my seat for 2 weeks and didn't know that I existed.
Yeah.
And so I got there and I was like, oh, like this is my assigned seat. And she was like, I've been here for like 2 weeks. I didn't know that someone sat here. And I was like, yeah.
This is awkward. I sit here.
I was like, I'm sorry, I've just been gone.
Aww.
And she was like, don't worry, like I'm gonna get another chair and pull something up. But I was just never there.
Yeah.
And I was trying to make everything up from my bed. I'd have my mom like stack up pillows behind my head and get like one of the like breakfast trays, and I just sat there all day long. And they'd bring me food, and that was my life for, gosh, it was like a year and a half. that I did that. And then, but we kept moving. I got on medication. It didn't do anything, but they just kept telling me to take it. And then I got to my junior year, and we got to March, and the world shut down.
Yeah.
And it was...
Which was maybe kind of good for you.
It was good for me. I didn't like it because
You love to be social.
I want to be social,
community.
and I loved school.
Yeah.
And I already wasn't going a ton, and then it was just gone.
Yeah.
And not only was it just gone, you couldn't go and see people because we were quarantined. Like, no one was supposed to go around to anybody. Gosh, do you remember that paper that you had to have in your car if you were driving around that said, like, that you were essential?
No.
My parents had those.
That is crazy.
I know. Like,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
On the road, you had to have one of those.
What?
It was wild.
I was pregnant. And it was when me and Jordan were dating, and me and my mom ganged up on him and made him quit his job so that he could stay with us. He was so sweet. He did it.
So
he quit
cute.
his job to hang out with us. But
so
that's
sweet.
crazy. I did not know about the
it was
paper.
Crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
It was so strange. But that gave me a lot of time to rest and to work on, like, my nutrition and my physical health. I lost like 40 pounds from like my highest to my lowest. Not healthily, for sure. But I was exercising a lot, which was not good.
Yeah. On top of the migraines and stuff?
Yes. I was just powering through and going with it. And by that point, I was like, it's springtime. I'm losing weight. Like, I feel like I'm doing so good. But I was still in so much pain.
Yeah.
And so exhausted.
Yeah.
And gosh, when was it? It was like that summer. I had like the weirdest, like, I was still getting like really strange stuff. I remember there was one time, my cousin Olivia was staying at the house, and I like walked out of the room that she was staying in. I'd been with her, and we were gonna go, I was dog sitting, we were gonna go let the dogs out. And I walked out of there to go and find my shoes, and I got so dizzy. I got vertigo so bad it hit me like a ton of bricks. I fell on the floor. I started throwing up. The room was spinning like crazy. And
just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I just had to sleep it off. Like, it didn't go away. I just had to go to bed. I was carried into my bed and just went with it for the night. I was still getting like really weird stuff. But then school started again. And I was only in for like a couple weeks. I was doing a work, like, I guess it was a work study program where I had to do so much paperwork, but I was so excited about it. I had to leave school at like 2:00 every day and go to work. So I was still holding an office job that I had. And because my elective focus was art, I had to like talk to the marketing girls, and they let me do some like graphic design things.
That's so fun.
Yeah, so I was getting to do things that I liked there, and I was just going there after school, and I still got to hold my job, and it was so cool that I got to leave, even though I liked school.
Yeah.
I was really happy to still be doing that, and I was going to church all the time. I was coming here, and I was going to like thing to thing to thing, and I was just powering through everything like I did.
You started to feel a little normal again?
Even
though
bit.
You were still, I mean,
yeah.
You just learned to live with the pain.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah, because I thought that everything was normal, because I'd always been told that everything was normal.
Yeah.
And
You just thought it was your new normal?
Yeah. I thought that everyone was living that way, which is crazy looking back on it now, that I know that I felt horrible, but I had no idea at all. And I got like, gosh, it wasn't even a full month. I was missing less school because I was just powering through. somehow. And it was September 10th of 2020, so still in COVID. I was sitting in one of my classes. It was like a homeroom situation. So we would watch like the computer safety like videos up on the board or something like that, because we all had laptops.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there. I was just sitting with like my hands in my lap, and my arm just fell off of my leg. And I felt it go. And I went to like, but you're not in your right mind at all. And I looked at it like I was going to pick it back up, and it just didn't move.
Yeah.
And I was like, what in the world? So I went and I grabbed it.
It's
and
not funny.
No, but I get it though, because it's crazy.
It is crazy.
And I went and I put it on my lap, and I was like, okay. And I looked at my friend next to me.
Weird.
Yeah. And I was like, hey, this is going to sound really weird. I can't feel my arm right now. And she was like, I'm going to get the teacher. And I was like, okay. Like, you can do that. That's
I'm just
fine.
going to hang out here.
Yeah. We were like going to lunch later. I had plans to sit with one of my friends that like her lunch got changed around, and she was finally going to be in mine. And I was like, okay, like I'm staying here, but all right. And she got the teacher and went out into the hallway. And I said the same thing. Like, this is going to sound really weird. I can't feel my arm at all. And I think I like picked it up and dropped it. And it was like the craziest thing. This is still like wild to me to think, because it was like a limp noodle.
Yeah.
Like, it moved in a way that like I can't even replicate it.
Yeah.
It like flopped around.
Like, wasn't even attached to you anymore.
No, like you literally could have cut it off, because
Yeah.
such like a misconception about strokes is that it tingles.
Mm.
So sometimes when people get like their arm falls asleep or something, like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I'm having a stroke. No, you're not, because there's nothing down to the bone. You don't feel anything. It is literally like it's not yours.
Yeah, that's
There's
crazy.
no sensation at all. You literally could have cut it off and I would have no idea. And so my teacher was like, oh my gosh, go to the nurse. And so I went with my friend, and we went in there, and I told the nurse the same thing. I said, this is going to sound really weird. I can't feel my arm. I think I picked it up and I dropped it. And I said, oh, I don't think I need to go home. I just thought I should tell somebody. At that point, I was like, everything is normal. Yeah. This is fine. And for a month before
like, hey,
that,
it's just another day.
Exactly.
I'm having a stroke.
This
it's
is
just another day
in my life.
Yeah.
And by that point, for a month, it's just so crazy. I would feel like a fourth of that. Where it would come in like randomly in the afternoon. I remember I was going out to my car one day after school, and I felt it get stiff and heavy and lose a little bit of feeling. And I remember I called my dad, and my dad was like, that happens to everybody. That's fine. Yeah. And I was like,
it's never happened to me.
Cool. Okay, sure. And that happened like not every day, but like multiple times a week for a month before that. So I just thought it was that, like, this has to be fine. And but after I said I don't think I need to go home, I thought I should tell somebody. And the nurse was like, I'm gonna call your mom. And I was like, okay, she's not gonna do anything. And she was like, I'm gonna talk to her. And I was like, good luck.
I'm just gonna eat some crackers and
yeah,
chill out.
I'm just gonna sit here. Thank goodness I could still talk, because some people they get a clot like in an area where their speech is, and they can't talk at all, and they just have to sit there and they don't know what's going on.
It's so sad.
I know. Thankfully I still had it, but I was not
you didn't have your wits about you
at all. No. And so my mom came, and she was like, I'm gonna take you to the chiropractor, because we thought that it was like a nerve thing.
Yeah.
Because surely you don't think that your 17-year-old daughter is having a stroke. Yeah. And we go to the chiropractor, and we just like walked in and told them like, I can't feel my arm. And they were like, we're going to do x-rays like right now. And so they rushed me in there, did x-rays, and then put me back in a room. And I remember I was sitting there, and I felt it go through my back, like all the way down my side, up my face, down my leg. Like, it just spread everywhere. I remember thinking, like, gosh, if you pierced my ear right now, I wouldn't know at all. Which, like, please pierce my ear. I want another one. But I didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was growing. Like, the sensation of it, like, going through my neck was really weird. And it going down my leg. And I remember telling my mom, like, my leg is stiffening. Like, I can't feel it. And at that point, they came back in and they were like, hey, there's nothing on here. Like, from an x-ray, like a chiropractic standpoint, it looks fine. So my mom took me and they said, like, I think you need to go to the hospital. So we went over to Park West. And when we went inside, I think I just said, I can't feel my arm. And within, like, not even a full minute, they had, like, neurology was down there. And they were sitting with me, and I think the stroke team came down too. And they were sitting with me, and they were like, can you pick it up at all? And I said, no. And I think I did. Like, I picked it up, and I dropped it. Because that was the like, best thing that I could show you. Because even as I walked around, I had to hold it. Otherwise, it would, like, flap in the wind.
Yeah.
Just so strange. It was so weird.
Watch out for my arm.
Yeah, literally. And so I would, like, hold it as I walked.
Oh, my goodness.
And like I said, like, it was going up through my neck and through my face and down my leg. And they're like, is it getting any better? And I said, no. And so they rushed me into an MRI really quickly. And then they put me in a room. And I had, oh, gosh, I wish I could find this lady. I still remember her name. She, it was the head of the stroke division at Park West, and she was with me, and she wheeled me in, and she talked to me how they were going to do the MRI, and they were going to give me contrast through an IV, and how everything was going to work. And if I needed anything, she was right out there. Mm-hmm. And she took me in there, she wheeled me back, she was with me the whole time. And then a few minutes later, after I was back in my room, people rushed in and said, we need to get her TPA right now. She's got clots. And sure enough, I had multiple blood clots on the right side of my brain. And by that point, gosh, I would have been like 3 hours, like 45 minutes in with this, with not feeling my arm. And there's a window with strokes. It's like after you get to 4 hours, that's when it gets like really, really dangerous if you haven't gotten anything. And thank goodness my mom told me later while we were sitting in the chiropractor and I said that it was going. She said that the Lord told her blood clot.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So they got me TPA and they transferred me to Children's because they said that they could take care of me better there since I was only 17 and like kind of freshly 17. My birthday's in June, like late June.
Yeah.
And this was early September. So I was there in the ICU for a week. And, well, I wasn't in the ICU for a week. I was in the hospital for a week. I was in the ICU for a couple days, and they moved me to a floor. And, I did PT and OT in there. People would come in and make sure I knew how to brush my teeth and change my clothes and do all of those kinds of things before they discharged me.
So did you gain feeling back in your arm, like, immediately, or?
It was a slow build, but
a
definitely it started coming back, like, very quickly after the TPA. That's the blood clot buster that they send through your IV. So it did, like, I knew when that went in, that is what was happening for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that I was having a stroke. I thought that I was on stroke watch. I was, like, texting people, like, in the hospital, because they were like, where'd you go? And I was like, I'm in the hospital, I'm on stroke watch. And I don't even know to this day when they told me that I had a stroke. It was so strange. I feel like I just figured it out after a while, but I don't remember like, oh, I had a stroke.
Yeah.
Like, because you're not thinking. But I got out after a week, and I started physical and occupational therapy pretty much immediately. And I went 3 times a week, and I went to school 3 days a week because I ended up emailing them and was like, hey, can I come like every other day just to make sure that I'm like getting schoolwork. I can talk to my teachers if I have a question on something, but I don't think I should be going every day. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. Like, we're going to write that into your, like, 504 plan. Like, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. But I missed, like, I didn't look at anything for school for, like, 2 weeks. Because, of course, I was in the hospital for a week. And then I was in bed for a week.
Yeah.
And then from there, it was, like, slowly moving. Like, my mom would get me outside, and we'd, like, just walk, like, the length of the house, like, on the street. Or then we'd, like, get into the cul-de-sac, and I'd make it a little bit further. But they, and the whole time in the hospital, they did, like, every test that they could think of, and they found nothing that pointed to this. Their best guess at that point was that it was birth control. Which wasn't a bad guess.
Was this whenever they were, like, they didn't test you for the 2 that were rare?
Was a little, yes, at Children's, they did not test me for those 2. They did every test in the book except for 2, which is just strange to me, because I was counting.
Why would you not just go ahead and do the 2?
Literally, especially with the amount of blood that they took, I had, like, counted, like, vials of blood. And there was one time they came in and they took, like, a bottle.
Oh, my goodness.
Twice. And I got to, like, 30, and I stopped counting. I just lost count after that. Because they were doing everything. I was getting ultrasounds everywhere because the clots were small and there were multiple of them. So usually when that happens, it's an ischemic stroke. So there's a bigger clot somewhere and it throws smaller ones off of it. So they thought it was in my heart. So they did a heart echo. They thought maybe it's in my legs. So they checked all my legs and everything. But they couldn't find anything. So they didn't know, why do I have multiple, and, like, why did this happen in general? Why did the 17-year-old have a stroke? And we had no idea. They sent me to, like, a whole bunch of specialists after that just to clear everything. And they sent me to a rheumatologist, which is an autoimmune doctor. And we went in there, and they were like, lupus is rare. You don't have it. I don't think we need to test you for that. And at that point, I had so many IVs that week. I was like, cool. I don't want you to, like, take blood either if you don't have to. And he was like, you don't have it. You're good. And I was like,
that's crazy.
Okay. Yeah. So, didn't get tested for that. Went to a whole bunch of other doctors, never got tested for anything. And just kind of went on my recovery. I started speech therapy a little while after because I knew that, like, my brain was not working.
Yeah.
My memory was horrible. I felt like I couldn't process anything. Talking was hard. Yeah. It still is a little hard. Like, I couldn't, I was reading and I wasn't processing anything. I would have to read the same sentence, like a super easy sentence, over and over and over and over again to understand what was going on. And at that point... That's
me already.
I know. I still have some of that, but I was also making up, like, a month's worth of school at that point.
Yeah.
From my house. And my Grammy, she had moved to Knoxville earlier that year. She'd always lived far away. But it had to be God putting her there at that time, because she had a stroke when I was in middle school. And she stayed with me every day. She took me to physical therapy and occupational therapy, and she'd drop me off, and then she'd come back 2 hours later and pick me up and take me back home. And then she'd stay in the house and drink only coffee all day long.
That's so cute.
Yeah, and she'd watch her shows on the TV.
Aww.
But she understood fully.
Yeah.
And she was the only person that understood. But I kept going through all of my therapies and everything, and I made it through the rest of my senior year. I graduated with a 4.2 GPA.
Amazing.
Because I worked so hard.
Because
I cared so much that I wanted to keep A's. I wanted to do the best that I could do so I could go to college.
Yeah.
And I graduated, and I got, like, a year. I was getting close to a year out, and I still couldn't feel my fingers. Because the worst part of the numbness were my fingers, for sure. It was like there was a gradient. Like this was the worst, and then like this was really bad. Up through my face was really bad, and down my side. But my leg was a little better. But from here out, it got a little better as it went.
Yeah.
And only 20% of stroke patients fully recover. It's not a lot. A lot of them pass away. But I still couldn't feel my fingers, and I was almost a year out, and that was bad news at that point. It was, you're like, that's just not going to get better. You're going to be stuck with that. And it was really annoying because I would like if I was trying to spray sunscreen, I couldn't hold it.
Yeah.
And it was the weirdest feeling, like touching something and being able to feel this, but like there's not.
I would hate that.
It's the most frustrating thing, and I don't know why it is.
That sounds awful. No, it sounds terrible.
It's so strange.
I hate feeling numb.
Yeah, it's the weirdest because it's like warm too.
I feel like I could kind of like understand how that feels because I had an epidural with Rainin, and I hated the way like my legs felt. They felt like they weren't my legs. I would touch them and I'd be like, ooh, I don't want to touch my legs. My skin felt different. Like I didn't even want to feel my skin because it didn't feel like my skin. Yeah. It was so weird. Yeah. It was very strange. So I can definitely imagine how that felt. Terrible.
Yeah. And I had it. And I remember going into Oasis one night because I moved up from students. And, gosh, I just remember I was so discouraged because I had a neurology appointment the next day, and I knew that they were going to tell me, like, you're just stuck with it.
Yeah.
Because this is July. September's not that far away. It's just, like, I had plateaued.
Yeah.
And I was still doing all my exercises and everything. I was using my, like, therapy putties that were, like, super, super thick, and you'd have to squeeze it, and it was so difficult, but I was doing it all the time, and it wasn't making a difference. And